filters, and based on that you could call it low pass. Low pass means that it's trying to pass only frequencies in the lower end of the spectrum. High pass is when it tries to spread only the higher frequencies. Band pass is where somewhere it's like a band, passing only certain band of frequencies, or band stop. Different things of filters. This is the characterization of the filters based on what they pass from the frequencies. Or you should also know that, again I said, typically if you have MATLAB and if you're used to it, or in communication thing, you just put a type of command filter, it does whatever it wants to do on MATLAB. But that doesn't run MATLAB on satellite, so all the filters have to be done using these kind of metallic things. These are all metals. Again, pieces of waveguides, pipes done in a certain way so that it passes some frequencies, does not pass some frequencies. So the filter here is no longer a kind of a command, but it's more like a system which has different shapes depending on what it should pass and what it should not pass, and these things.
So, okay, this goes on the satellite, it's going into the outer Earth, and then it's exposed to all harsh conditions. So, I mean, is it just all protected? So the characteristics of the filter wouldn't change?
The filters change, the characteristics of the filters do change with heat. They do change with temperature, but then they would have well, the two things, the material and the housing.
Yeah.
So they would try to make sure that this impact is minimal, but it cannot be guaranteed that this is the filter for the next 15 years of the satellite.
So what would be a typical housing?
One, good question. So for that I would try to defer it when my colleague comes from SES who actually has built the satellite and they run the satellite. So it's much better if we get a good housing.
When you talk about filters, I was expecting electrical components, but this seems more like mechanical components.
Most of it, the problem with the electrical component is that well, you need to put some chips or something, and then you're putting all these things on the satellite. It's exposed to quite a certain amount of radiation, and it's not guaranteed that what you put on the chip remains the same after some time. So they try to make it space hard and everything. It's a technology that's ongoing. So that part we will see in the later half when we look at novel processor payloads. There they put the filters on electronic component. But now it is an analog component. It's more a mechanical, physical device that you just put it there.
So due to the physical structure, it will filter some frequencies?
Yes, exactly. Due to the physical structure, they call it resonance. It passes some, it filters some. As I said, this is a physical structure that goes in the line of a microwave radiation path. So the problem here is it has insertion loss. In a sense, it absorbs some power. So you need to have to reduce the power that it absorbs. Whenever you put anything metallic in a radiating environment, it absorbs power. Okay. So there are two filters that we're more interested in. I will now go into this thing. The first thing is the input multiplexing filter. This is what it is. So here is the picture. Just keep this in mind. So what happens is that you have the signal that is coming up from the satellite. An uplink, it will have this kind of a structure. Each channel, as I was mentioning, each channel probably going to a different part of the beam, or so each beam has its own has its own radiating path. So what this input multiplexing filter does is, this is called a circulator. So what it does is it allows only paths in one direction. So it goes from here and it just comes back. Okay, so that's something like this. This is the circulator. So you have this path, this multiplex coming in, and then this filter piece of looks like this is tuned to this frequency. So what it does is this filter allows this part, and then it throws out all the others back. Okay, so it goes in, this part goes out, and then all the other three come back. And this circulator does not let you go back in this direction, it goes only in one direction. That's a circulator. So And then the same thing happens here. It's tuned to another frequency. It goes on and goes on and goes. So what happens is that now here you had a multiplex of frequencies, and then you have split them into different things, and each of them would go to probably one beam, or in this case it is going to one amplifier, which will come later. Each of them goes to one amplifier. So that's the input multiplexing filter. Again, it's much easier to code it in MATLAB. For I equals 1 to this, I just do this. No, here it's a component. You need this guy, which is very important. There's a circulator. He allows the waves to go in only one direction. But if you were to get back, then it's a two-way direct transmission. It doesn't work. So a lot of these fine details are needed to be understood when you put these components on the paper. And this is how a microwave, IMUX looks like. And this is from ACS. I don't know if for people who have understood, who have seen this filter characteristic, this is how it would look like. A typical old TV system used to have this kind of filter, which is about plus minus 30 megahertz in frequencies, and then this is how it would look like. It would pass only frequencies in this range, and then all the others are cut out. This is a typical input multiplexing filter. So right now what we have done is from antenna to low noise amplifier, we have down converted, and then we have put an input multiplexing filter that is giving out the frequency that we want for a band that we want to now finally amplify. Okay, we have done one sort of amplification, low noise amplification. That's more just to set up the things. It's more like an abstract, and then the real thing happens now, which is the high power amplifier. There are two modes in which it works. The satellite can work. One mode is, it doesn't matter what the input power is, the output power is always constant. So that is one mode. That's called the fixed, the constant signal level. So no matter what you use the input, your output is always fixed. The other thing is that you make the output a function of the input. So if the input is increasing, the output also increases. So there are different services that use different components. So let's not get into those details right now, but there are two modes in which you could operate this satellite. Okay. And the whole idea is to have what is the idea of the amplifier? The amplifier is to have a certain EIRP on the downlink. So the user, I need to give you so much power. That is the main idea of the amplifier. And so you would require, for example, typically how do you characterize? This is antenna characteristics. Is a radiation pattern on the downlink to the user. Well, of course, at the center of the antenna pattern, you have the highest gain, and then it goes off, it tapers off as you move out. So your typical thing is you also not only look at the maximum gain, but you would look at what we call the edge of the coverage, where you're still serving users, but then he's getting a lower gain. It's like when you have your mobile phone on the edge of the cell, you will switch over to another operator or another base station. It's something like that, but you're still being served. So that is where you would look, that is why you make sure that you serve a certain amount of EIRP depending on what agreements you had. Okay. So that is the criterion for you to do, to get the amplifier. But look at it. This is 45 dB watt is what I need to put it down. Okay? And the 45 dB watt is 10 power 4 watts. Fine. And then you had, the inputs that were coming in were 10 power minus 9. So you see the amplification that goes from input to the output of the satellite. And where do we get this amplifier? Doesn't work value. So this is what the amplifier would look like. So this guy is called a channel amplifier or linearizer. Don't worry about it. This tries to say, let's say it's a switch which tells you whether I want to have constant output power or I want the output power to vary with the input power. As we said, there are two modes, fixed gain and the automatic gain. So this is what it does. And then this is called the electronic power conditioner. So one would understand, the whole idea of amplification is that you put solar arrays on the satellite. that solar arrays generate DC direct power, like the batteries. And this is the DC power, and then this has to be converted to more like the alternating current, AC power. I don't know if you could understand, all of the things work on the AC. So you need to convert this DC power from the battery to the signal, and so this guy tries to give that power, or he tries to get you the DC power and give it to the TWT. TWT is called a traveling wave tube amplifier. That's not worry anything about it. It looks like something like this. It's an electronic beam, etc., etc. But what it does is that it can provide significantly high gains. It can take the solar power, the DC power, and then convert it to the signal power. For all those who've done transistor theory, it's the same thing that happens when you do a transistor. So it takes the battery power and puts it onto the signal. So it's a DC to AC. So that's what is happening, but it's a much higher scale. Okay. Well, it is done on a, well, I also don't know much of the kind of thing. So it is done in a housing called traveling wave tubes. Now there are a few things where they're trying to replace this traveling wave tubes by a chip which is called the solid state power amplifiers. The technology is maturing, so in some time probably we'll also see that happening. So the output.
The output of this device, the AC power, is that more like a block current or a sinusoidal current?
It's a sinusoidal.
So perfectly.
Well, it depends on the signal, modulates the signal, yes. It's more or less sinusoidal.
Okay.
So from the DC thing, you convert it to.
Okay.
Well, if you look at it, so as I was mentioning, the output power is about 50 to 100 watts on the satellite, and what was coming in was quite low. So you should see that, and then the ERP, you multiply this by the antenna gain of the satellite. So the power gain, usually what we characterize an amplifier is how much gain it does. What is the input, what is the output? So you divide the output by the input, that will give you the gain. But here the inputs are quite minimal, it's very small, so you don't define the gain like output by input. So what is important in this is what we call the power efficiency, which is how much DC power I use to give my AC power. Why do I worry about the DC power? The DC power is something that is generated by the solar panels. And the solar panels are put on the satellite. And you can only house only so much solar panels on the satellite. I don't put too many solar panels, the mass goes up. And it brings all the other things into consideration. So you have a certain limited amount of solar power available, and that solar power is converted with some efficiency to a DC. So your DC power is very important, it is a scarce resource. So you want to utilize that DC power to the maximum extent possible, and so that's why you would look at as a power efficiency as the output RF power and to the DC power. Okay. I will skip these two. Maybe Joel will present the characteristics, and then finally, what would happen is in some places, in some cases, what would also happen is that you have different amplifiers amplifying different signals, but then you want to have all of these things going onto one beam.
The RF in the previous slide.
Yes, the RF in is the input.
The input on the dish or input to the
input
HP?
to the input to this one.
To the HP.
It's still microwatts.
Okay.
Still microwatts.
So we can kind of ignore that term.
Yeah, you can ignore that term. Essentially, it's RF out by DC. Okay, so in some cases, you would want a lot of things going onto one beam. So, for example, while you have a bigger beam on continental Europe, you want to put the Scandinavian channels, the county cricket, so on and so forth. Everything has to go onto one beam. So you have amplified them separately. So this is where it's coming out from the amplifier, and then what would happen is, okay, you don't need the circulator here. wrong thing, you don't need the circulator, I'm sorry. It goes through a filter, and then it kind of combines both of them into one beam. So the input multiplexer was splitting into different amplifiers. The output multiplexing filter tries to combine all of them if needed. Okay, depending on how many channels need to go onto that, it tries to connect so many channels into that. Okay. You should note there's one difference between the input multiplexing and output multiplexing filter. More from an engineering sense, the input multiplexing filter is before the power amplifier. The output multiplexing filter is after the power amplifier. The power amplifier, as I said, is giving you so much power, there's a few hundred watts. And then if I put an output multiplexing filter that gobbles up half the power, so if you put a filter that eats up a lot of the power through radiation, through insertion loss, then there's no point of having such a good amplifier. So you need to have a very good filter which kind of has a very low loss. It gets heated up, but it should not eat so much power. It should not consume so much power. So that's one key difference between the input multiplexing and the output multiplexing filter. This guy you're putting in the line of fire, if you want to call it. And then also the amplifier it amplifies the signal and also puts some additional frequencies out because it's a nonlinear device. So this guy tries to eliminate all the unwanted radiations coming out of the amplifier because you have strict conditions on the downlink. You cannot, when the regulations say that means that you can transmit with so much power in this band, but you cannot transmit in any other band. So the output of the amplifier would have sound residual transmissions in the other branch, and this ohmic filter tries to take it out. Okay, it looks very much similar to the input multiplexing filter, if you know. It's like a filter. It passes some frequencies and then attenuates the other frequencies. Okay, so here this completes the kind of payload that I was trying to think. Payload performs, in summary, the payload performs the necessary relaying functionality. We decided, we looked at a couple of them. But then there are some design constraints. Of course, the first thing is, what is it the satellite used for? Based on that, you will design a payload. That you will see when Joel talks about it. But then you should also consider mass. Mass is very important because if you have been told, it covers the launch costs, how heavy should your launch vehicle be. More importantly, for these kind of geo satellites, the satellites are never stationary, so they keep moving around. No matter how, you cannot put it exactly at that point, they keep moving around. So you need to bring them back in position. And to bring them back in position, you need fuel. And the amount of fuel that goes onto the satellite depends on what is the mass of the satellite. Okay, so if you want to have a heavy satellite, then you need to have much more fuel, so that doubles up the mass again. So you really don't want to have too much fuel, too much mass of the satellite. The other important thing is, typically, you have all the aging effects, but then the bigger problem of the satellite end of life is because you cannot control the satellite in a position for most of the time. It just starts wavering around, and you don't have enough fuel to control it. And then you just raise the orbit, put him up in some other orbit, and that's the end of life. So end of life is typically defined by the amount of fuel you have. And that fuel depends on the mass. So everything is connected. So you want to have as little, reduce the mass as possible. And of course you have the active components where you want to see how much power they consume, because power on board the satellite is only to the solar panels. And then if you want to put a passive mechanical component, then you have to worry about how much power they consume into the insertion loss. Other big thing is heat. You need to somehow cool all the things. So you actually put more components to conduct the heat to the surface of the platform so that it dissipates in there. This is what I had for the payload. So I just quickly think, so this is all we have in a payload. And then what I do is now, for a few minutes, for 10-15 minutes, till Joel comes, want to say that fine, everything looks good, they do their functionalities, but nothing is ideal. Everything has the problem. We kind of listed a few of the problems, but I'll try to list a few more problems that come with this. It's part and parcel of the payload design. The first thing is called phase noise. There's everything is a noise or interference or there's something. So what it does is, you have a signal. You have a signal which is, I don't know if you are aware of. So your signal has both the amplitude, and then it has a phase, and then it has a frequency. So what happens is that when you have a phase noise, this is not constant. P becomes some function of time, and then it becomes random. So what you have was, this was constant, so if this was a sine wave, then for different phi, it would move. You would just shifted the wave. But now if you do the new thing, would be like this, and this is no longer a sine wave. You don't even know how it looks like. So I will show you some pictures of what impact it does. So this is called a phase noise. Unfortunately, this happens. The higher the signal power, the more is the phase noise. Okay, so you have to think how to kind of reduce this phase noise. They occur everywhere. So what happens when I have this phase noise? Well, that is the mathematical formulation. But there are different things that happen. The first thing I would show you in this picture, I guess you've done all the QPSK constellations and you know the constellations, right? Okay, so here is the 4 QPSK constellations, quadratic QPSK. Then if I have phase noise, then you would have the receiver, this is what would happen. Okay, so this is phase noise with some normal additive noise. This is what it looks like, but I could still distinguish between them. If I add phase noise, it rotates, the amplitude changes. This is what it would look like. Okay, this is for the most simple case of a constellation with 4 points. But this is not what I'm interested in, because these 4 points give me very low data rate. I'm looking at bigger ones. This is, if you look at it, this is one drink, 2, 3. It's a much higher constellation, and this is what it does to your constellation. You don't see the constellation at all. So it's lost. So the phase noise can rotate the constellation, change the amplitude, and so at your receiver you're completely you don't know what to do. So it's decodes to noise, so it doesn't do anything. The other thing is, other thing that it does is, suppose I have a system where I have one user here, the other user here, and the regulations tell me, look guys, I don't want you to interfere with this guy in any way. And when I have phase noise, this is what happens. So it's a broadening of the spectrum. Okay, and then the frequency broadens, and you start leaking into the other way. Of course, here it's minus 10 dB, but then the regulations are even lower. They want you to have minus 25 dB loss. Well, here, so the phase noise impacts you and impacts the other users as well. So you have to figure out there are some ways to how to deal with it, but it's important to recognize that there exists this phase noise, and these are the impacts of the phase noise, and then you need to find ways to clean it up. Well, that's one thing. The other thing is our high power amplifier. Our high power amplifier is not a linear system. It's not a linear system. That means whatever gets in it comes out with many more things. For example, if I put cos omega t and then the amplifier squares it, for example, cos square omega t. Suppose it squares it, this is the amplifier. Then you could see that this, if you use some trigonometry, it will be some, I think if I'm not, something like this. So frequency here becomes twice the frequency. Okay? So a nonlinear, if you don't understand, it's fine, but then what it does is it throws up many more frequencies in addition to what was being amplified. Okay? So, and then this also has an effect similar to the phase noise. The constellations, the red are the points that I have transmitted, and what I get is the blue because of this amplifier. Okay, so now I would skip this, and then I would look at some more nice pictures here. So if I have an amplifier, I pass one channel. I just pass one channel. This is what happens. Okay. Now I assume that the amplifier is very big, very wide band, 500 megahertz wide band. Instead of transmitting one, I put two frequencies for amplification. Let's put, this is called the multi-carriers. I think I put two frequencies. Instead of one frequency, I put two frequencies. And this is what happens. Not only do you get that frequency, the two frequencies, but then you also get products of those two frequencies, and it becomes worse. Suffices to say that the more nonlinear the amplifier, the worse the output is when I put multiple carriers. If I put multiple channels into the amplifier and I try to amplify it, then I have a very bad performance. So I need to do some signal processing to reduce this. Now one could question, why do you want the amplifier to be nonlinear? Because that is where it gives me the highest power efficiency. If I have the amplifier not in the nonlinear mode, then my power efficiency is very small. So then I would lose out on the DC power. So for example, I'm always giving, let's say for example, I gave 50 watts of DC power. Now I would operate, for example, in 50 watts of DC power. I operate in the nonlinear region, then I would get, say, let's say 50 watts of RF power. Let's assume that case.
50 watts of what power?
RF power, the output. Okay. On the other hand, this is a very high efficiency, it doesn't work like this, but let's assume for the time being it's like that. But if I want to make it lesser and lesser nonlinear, I still give 50 watts of DC power, but I'm going to get 20 watts of output power. And then the amplifier is in a very nice, well behaved, you don't have any of these, it will be nice red dots, but I only get 20 watts of power. Is that 20 watts of power sufficient for me? Well, if it is sufficient, then fine, go ahead and do it. But typically, if that 20 watts is not sufficient to close the link from the satellite to the ground, then I need to push the amplifier further and further into saturation. I want 50 watts of power, then this happens. Then this happens, then I need to do something more signal processing, more from, was probably not needed for you, to kind of get rid of this. So the amplifier gives you gains, but also gives you things that you don't want.
Can you just explain what is a linear amplifier and what is a non-linear amplifier?
Let me see if I have a picture. Okay, let's, I don't know if this is, let me, give me a second. Okay. Okay, so a linear amplifier is one. Like for example, here is one. It's not a very good. Let's look at this one. This is good. You transmit. This is the. Well, here it's also normalized, but if you change, if I plot the input versus the output to the amplifier versus the output to the amplifier, In some region, it is a straight line. That is the linear region. Okay, that's the linear region. And then after some time, well, it doesn't continue to, if you increase the input power, it is not going to continue, the output power is not going to go linearly, and then it kind of deviates from the line. It reaches a maximum point and then it falls off. So this is an amplifier characteristic. So when I increase the input power, the power that's going into the amplifier, the output power increases to a certain extent, and then it reaches the maximum output power and then it falls off. Okay?
But then, as per this graph, the linear part is always equal to or more than the non-linear part, right? In terms of the ratio.
No.
Output is in which axis, sorry?
Is it not like when you have a linear amplifier, the shape of the input and output kind of remains same, it's just that the output signal has been amplified, whereas when you do it in non-linear, the shape changes and it kind of tapers and...
Well, yes, you want to put it like that, yes, a linear amplifier just puts a gain to the input signal. It's, if I have x of t, my linear amplifier would just do this, 8 times itself. Okay? But if it is a non-linear amplifier, well, what you get is, to be honest, it becomes like this, x of t plus a1 x of x square of t plus a2 x cube of t, it becomes something like this. So that's the non-linear part that I was talking about. So the point here is the amplifier cannot just get, as you increase the input power, the output power does not grow in the same scale. It reaches to a maximum value here and then it drops off. So I want you to operate here, but here it's more or less already in a linear region of operation. And that's why you get all those distortions.
Okay, one more question. We have this IMUX and a HOMUX, right? So why do we do this? I mean, why do we, if we are going to separate the frequencies and again join them later?
No, there are two things. One, it's not necessary that you have to join. You don't, not necessarily that. The point here is, okay, the IMUX separates the frequency. One reason is also because of the amplifier. Suppose I have an amplifier which is wide, I can put two frequencies directly into it. Where is my IMUX picture? Give me a second. Sorry. Okay, so suppose I have this guy and then I put directly to the amplifier. Suppose the amplifier can amplify all of them. But look at the 4 frequencies and then you are in the nonlinear region. So not only you get these 4, but you get million other things, and then the output is very low. So what you try to do is you try to take each of them and pass it to a separate amplifier so that your nonlinear aspects are reduced. Okay? So that's why you do this thing. And then suppose these two had to go to that beam, instead of putting it on one wideband amplifier, I would put on 2 smaller amplifiers and then I combine. That's where the combination comes to the multiplexing, HOMUX.
So the eMUX is actually a demultiplexer?
Yeah, well, yes.
Okay.
Basically to make sure that the noise does not impact my input and output. Like any noise that is being also been added during my operation.
Yeah, whatever noise that gets into the signal band, it remains. That I cannot change.
Yeah.
With these components, I cannot change. There I need to understand a bit more what is being transmitted. But this is to prevent these guys adding more noise.
Yeah.
Or adding more distortions. I will just, Joel will also talk a bit more about the amplifiers. That's why I try to keep it a bit shorter. But yeah, so there are these single carrier and multi carrier things, and also the filters. the filters we want, for example, we want them to transmit everything within that band without doing any putting any arbitrary gain or changing the phase of the signal. But that doesn't really happen. A filter, we say, well, on this scale you say that it is flat, but it is not flat. There is always a ripple there. And then you have all these guys which are the transition bands, these are the side lobes, all these things are there. It's not a brick wall filter which is like this. I just transmit this signal. So there are physical components. So you have, you take something from the next band, you give out something into the next band. So there are some degradations because of the filter. More from the phase, also from the amplitude. So the filters also degrade the performance, not only from insertion loss, but also from the deviation from the functionality that they were supposed to do. Okay. So if I were to put up the summary of the payload impairments, every component has some amount of impairment of the other. Right from the antenna here, where you would get noise, and then you would have phase noise, you have amplifiers, you have the filters, everything adds impairments. The point is, to some extent, you can control these impairments by designing the components, designing the architecture, putting it in the right places, and after some time, it's just that you cannot do anything more with the components. Then you have to go a step back, and then you have to look at what are you transmitting. And then you have to do signal processing on what you transmitted, and the receiver, how you decode, how you estimate, all this. And then it becomes a different, it's no longer a satellite system design, but it's more signal processing communication. It goes into that realm. Okay. So this is where I would stop for, this is what I had for today. Joel should join us soon, and then we will have a bit more about the other topics. So these are some references, but you guys can be free to take a break, or I'm around if you want to have some, if you have some questions.
Would you mind speak about the diagrams of the filters? What is their frequency?
This one?
Yes. Why they are like this?
No, the idea is that you want to pass these frequencies. You want to pass frequencies in this range. So forget these numbers. Just look at it. You want to pass frequencies in this range, and anything beyond that you don't want to pass. So that's why the filters are in this area. You only take that portion. The other portions you want to throw it out. Ideally, it would have been a wall filter like this. But these are physical components, so they cannot generate such things. So you have this.
And the term rejection and the group delay, what are they?
Don't bother. It becomes more difficult if you have what? You have course in digital signal processing sometime. You've done it. Now it becomes more involved, so that's not worry about it. Don't bother.
No, I don't bother myself, but it's legal in the.
Yeah, because this was well, it was what? If you took, okay, so let's put it like this. So a filter impacts both the amplitude and the phase of the signal. Okay. The way it affects the amplitude of the signal is given by the amplitude response. The way it affects the phase of the signal is given by the group delay. Okay. So let me see if I can write something. Let's for example, let this signal, or let's take a sine wave. something like this. So this gives you the phase, sorry, the amplitude, and this gives the phase response. So, and then you do it for different frequencies, frequency 1, frequency 2, frequency 3, and then you okay. So for example, for frequency 1, this is what it looks like. For frequency 2, you would have something like this. So then you have W1, W2, all these things, and then you plot the amplitude. So you get this A1, A1, A2. So you plot something like this. That you get there. And then you do it for the phase. Then you get that. I think you can, yeah, I don't know if
Joel has come in.
It's come?
Yeah, he has come.
Yes.
Okay, this is
Waiting up.
oh, you can